Okay, so picture this for a second. It's New Year's Eve, maybe, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Right. You're out, you're trying to get home after a party, so you pull out your phone, you open the Uber app, and your jaw just completely drops.
Because the surge pricing is off the charts.
Exactly. A ride that normally cost you, say, $20 is suddenly quoting you over $100.
And people were furious.
I mean, beyond furious. Everyone was furious. At the time, this was a complete scandal. People were taking screenshots, they were writing these long, angry articles, threatening to delete the app entirely.
It felt like a violation of how things are supposed to work.
Yes, exactly. But then, flash forward to today. If you open your app and you see that little lightning bolt icon and a multiplier on your screen, you might sigh, you might roll your eyes, but you just accept it.
Right, you either wait 10 minutes or you just pay the premium.
Yeah, exactly. In the span of just a decade, dynamic pricing went from this massive public outrage to a completely normalized, undisputed rule of our daily lives.
Which is wild when you really step back and think about it. It became an institution.
Right.
And that shift, it didn't happen because a government passed a law or because, society sat down and had some grand philosophical debate about the economic value of transportation.
No, not at all.
It happened because one tech company changed an algorithm, they ran some data, and they effectively reprogrammed human expectations on a massive, massive scale.
Which perfectly brings me to this giant stack of recent socioeconomic research papers I have sitting right here on the desk today.
It is a hefty stack, too.
It really is. So for everyone listening, our mission in this deep dive is to explore something that, on the surface, sounds super theoretical, but it's actually playing out on your smartphone literally every single second of the day.
Yeah, it's completely ubiquitous.
We are going to look at how the foundational theories of classical institutional economics, so those brilliant ideas about how societies function, how rules are made, why we behave the way we do, how all of that is being entirely revolutionized by artificial intelligence and big data.
Because for a very, very long time, economics and sociology were largely observational.
Right, like looking in the rearview mirror.
Exactly. Researchers looked at the past, they looked at surveys, and they just had to try to deduce why humans build the structures they do.
But reading through these papers, the big takeaway, like the major aha moment that completely hooked me, is that for decades, these brilliant minds have theorized about how societies function, and they were forced to use indirect evidence.
They had no other choice.
Right. But today, we actually have the digital instruments to prove that they were absolutely right in almost all of their hypotheses.
Oh, completely.
We are watching institutional economy and institutional sociology move to the next level.
Yeah.
We're no longer guessing, we're validating.
And the precision we have now is just staggering. I mean, the data logs from billions of digital interactions, every tap, every swipe, every single ignored notification, they're acting as the ultimate validation of the life's work of some of the greatest economic minds in history.
So let's introduce the core cast of theoretical giants, whose work is the backbone of this deep dive. Because I want to make sure we give credit where it's due.
We definitely need to set the stage with these figures.
Right. And we have to start with Douglas North. We have immense respect for Douglas North. He was the 1993 Nobel laureate who just completely reshaped economic history.
He really did change the entire paradigm.
Before North, a lot of economists looked at a country's success or failure based purely on physical resources. Do they have oil? Do they have good ports?
Right, the geographic lottery, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But North came in and said, no, what actually dictates growth or decline are the rules of the game.
The institutions.
Yes. He defined institutions as the formal and informal rules that govern our incentives and reduce transaction costs. And his observations were just staggeringly perceptive, especially considering he didn't have the big data tools we have today.
Well, North understood that markets do not exist in a vacuum. A market is a human construct, and it's constrained by human-made rules. So you can have all the natural resources in the world, but if your society's informal rules tolerate massive corruption, or if you lack basic property rights, your economy is going to stagnate.
It's all about the underlying structure.
Exactly. And alongside him, the papers we're looking at lean heavily on Geoffrey Hodgson, who is the contemporary founder of modern legal institutionalism.
And Hodgson did something really brave, didn't he?
He did. He essentially pushed standard neoclassical models aside. because those standard models, they often assume humans are these perfectly rational calculators, just maximizing our utility every single second of the day.
Which we absolutely are not.
Right, we're not robots. So Hodgson argued that habits, routines, and laws, those form the actual bedrock of economic behavior. We are creatures of habit long, long before we are rational calculators.
And speaking of structure, we can't talk about the structure of society without bringing up Ronald Coase and Oliver Williamson.
Oh, absolutely essential.
They are the pioneers who explained why firms even exist in the first place. Because if you think about it, why do we have massive corporations instead of just, millions of individual freelancers contracting with each other every morning?
Which would be chaos.
Complete chaos.
Yeah.
Coase and Williamson looked at this through the lens of transaction costs, market frictions, and organizational governance structures.
Right.
They realized that sometimes bringing activities inside a structured organization is just inherently cheaper than navigating the wild west of the open market.
And to round out this core group, we also have to highlight Elinor Ostrom, who is absolutely crucial to this discussion today.
Oh, I love Ostrom's work.
She was a total visionary. She challenged that classic tragedy of the commons idea.
That's the one that assumes people will just ruin everything if left to their own devices, right?
Exactly. The assumption was that if you leave a resource like a forest or fishery to a group of people, they will selfishly destroy it unless some top-down government entity steps in to control them.
Right, the heavy hand of the state.
But Ostrom spent her entire life proving that communities could actually manage common pool resources incredibly effectively through local self-governance rules. They build their own institutions organically from the bottom up.
So we have these brilliant minds. We have North mapping the rules of the game, Hodgson looking at human habits, Coase and Williamson charting transaction costs, and Ostrom proving bottom-up governance.
A powerhouse lineup.
But reading this research, the thing that hits you is that they all face the exact same problem. They lack the empirical tools to measure these phenomena directly.
They had to rely on proxies.
Yeah. It makes me think of theoretical physics.
Oh, how so?
Well, imagine Peter Higgs predicting the Higgs boson particle back in the 1960s. He used nothing but mathematics to say, look, this particle simply has to exist for the rest of the universe to make sense.
Right, the math demands it.
And he was completely right. But he lacked the Large Hadron Collider to actually see the particle. It took decades for us to build the machine that proved his math.
That is a brilliant way to frame it.
So North, Hodgson, Coase, Ostrom, they were the theoretical physicists of human behavior. And big data is our Large Hadron Collider.
Yes. The digital platforms we use today, like YouTube, Uber, TikTok, Amazon, they are unintentionally operating as these massive particle accelerators for human behavior.
Unintentionally being the key word there.
Right. They didn't build them for sociology. But by capturing every single interaction, they are providing the hard, empirical evidence that validates these classical frameworks.
It's amazing.
We can finally observe an institution being born, shifting, and dying in real time.
Which actually leads to a really fascinating crisis detailed in the research. They refer to it as the 18th century map problem.
Yes, this is a great metaphor.
So imagine classical institutionalism is like a map of the world drawn back in the 1700s. The continents, like the big macro theories of North and Coast, they're drawn perfectly. They got the general shape of the landmasses absolutely right.
All institutionalists are correct in their broad observations.
Exactly. But the internal territories, they are mostly blank. Maybe they're decorated with a few dragons and sea monsters where the cartographer just had to guess.
Right. Here be dragons.
Yeah. And navigating by the stars, using that antique map, it worked fine when the world moved at a slower pace. But it completely fails if you're trying to navigate the high-speed, hyper-connected reality of the digital age.
Because the old map struggles empirically today, mainly because it was built under three massive historical limitations.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one?
The first constraint is just the sheer scale of time. Douglas North theorized that institutions evolved with glacial speed.
Glacial, so very slow.
Very slow. He was looking at things like the development of the British Parliament or the evolution of maritime law. Those things took centuries to solidify. Traditions take generations to take root.
But you obviously can't apply that glacial speed to a world where a trend goes globally viral in an afternoon.
Precisely. A digital environment compresses the timeline of human sociology in a way that is just historically unprecedented. I mean, think about a platform like TikTok.
Oh, yeah. It changes culture overnight.
It can establish a global behavioral norm, a completely new format for consuming content, a new style of communication, a new way to interact with music in a matter of weeks.
Right.
So if you are using a sociological model built to track changes over a 50-year period, it simply cannot keep pace with the object of its study today. The math literally breaks down.
Wow. And reading further into the sources, the second limitation of the old map really blew my mind because it shifts the entire definition of who actually holds power.
The shift in agency.
Yeah. Historically, changes in human institutions were driven by ends. It was legislators passing laws, judges handing down rulings, entrepreneurs taking massive financial risks, or, activists pushing societal boundaries.
Human intent.
Right. But in the digital environment, the primary agent of institutional change is non-human.
It is the algorithm.
Algorithms are acting as the institutional entrepreneurs now.
They really are. They are the ones establishing the new rules, allocating digital resources, rewarding certain behaviors with visibility, and punishing others with obscurity.
Yeah.
When a recommendation engine decides, hey, we're going to prioritize watch time over click-through rates, it alters the economic and social behavior of millions of content creators overnight.
So an algorithm deciding what video plays next, or exactly how a feed is sorted, is functionally equivalent to a 19th century lawmaker writing a massive new trade policy.
Exactly.
It's setting the rules of the game, it's allocating incentives, but it's doing it without any conscious intent or moral philosophy.
And it does this at a scale and a speed that is mathematically impossible for any human legislator to replicate. Which actually brings us to the third limitation of classical theory, and perhaps the most critical one for the researchers. The problem of measurement.
Ah, yes. The measurement issue.
Classical institutionalism had to rely on what the source material calls rough entities. If you wanted to study something abstract, like the legitimacy of a government or the cultural norms of a society, you had a huge problem.
Right, because you cannot put a physical yardstick up against the concept of legitimacy.
You can't weigh a cultural value on a scale. So they had to guess, or they had to use proxies.
Proxy variables, right. Like using a survey to guess what a whole country is feeling.
Exactly. They would rely on broad surveys or indices like the World Bank governance indicators. But the research we are looking at highlights the profound danger in this approach.
Because it's flawed data.
Because when you use synthetic categories to measure complex human behavior, you often end up with just an illusion of knowledge.
Oh, that's a great phrase. An illusion of knowledge.
The papers critique several famous examples of this. Take Hofstede's cultural dimensions, for instance.
Oh, I remember studying that in a business class back in college. It's the framework that ranks countries on things like individualism versus collectivism, right?
Yeah. Yes, and it is widely taught in universities everywhere. But what people don't often realize is that those dimensions were originally based on surveys given to IBM employees in the late 1960s and early 1970s.
Wait, really? Just IBM employees?
Just IBM employees.
Yeah.
It was a very specific demographic of corporate workers, yet those findings were synthesized into these sweeping, universal truths about entire national cultures.
That is wild when you think about it.
And they were used for decades to guide international business and diplomacy.
So we are basing the entire concept of a nation's culture on how a handful of mid-century tech employees answered a questionnaire on a Tuesday.
Exactly. And the research also points out the catastrophic Reinhart-Rogoff spreadsheet error, which I think is just the ultimate cautionary tale about bad data.
Oh, I was reading about that in the prep materials. I think that is one of the craziest stories in modern economics.
It truly is. So Carmen Reinhart and Kenneth Rogoff published a highly influential economic paper in 2010.
Right after the financial crisis.
Yes. And they argued that when a country's debt exceeds 90% of its GDP, economic growth drops dramatically. Like it falls off a cliff.
And politicians love this, right?
They did. This paper was cited by politicians worldwide to justify massive, painful austerity measures.
Budget cuts, firing public workers.
Exactly. But, and here's the kicker, it turned out to be based on a literal coding error in Microsoft Excel.
Unbelievable.
They accidentally left a few countries out of their average calculation in the spreadsheet. When other researchers finally got the raw data years later and just fixed the Excel formula, the terrifying 90% cliff totally disappeared.
So millions of people lived through severe government budget cuts because of a missed row in a spreadsheet.
It underscores the immense danger of relying on aggregated, proxy measurements. You end up making life-altering policy decisions based on synthetic mirages.
But, and this is the exciting part, this is the pivot point in the research. We don't have to rely on rough entities or small sample surveys anymore.
No, we don't.
We are officially transitioning from rule-driven deducing-like, guessing how people might act based on abstract ideas, to data-driven discovery.
Exactly. We can look at the raw data logs, the actual behavioral trajectories of millions of individuals, and see the exact mechanics of society playing out in real time.
Let's pull on that thread a bit, because the sheer scale of observation happening right now is dizzying. These digital platforms, they aren't just passively observing us.
No, they are highly active.
They're actively experimenting. They are running thousands of A/B tests every single day. A designer changes the color of a buy now button, or a copywriter tweaks the wording of a push notification, or an engineer shifts the layout of a news feed.
Just tiny microscopic changes.
Right. And to the company, they are just optimizing engagement metrics to hit their quarterly targets. But looking through the lens of institutional economics, they are engaging in literal social engineering.
Every single A/B test is a behavioral intervention. The engineers at these platforms, they often view their work as purely technical, just moving pixels around. But they are inadvertently acting as institutional engineers.
Give me an example of how that scales up.
Well, let's look at the Uber example you opened the deep dive with. By introducing dynamic pricing, Uber didn't just balance the supply of drivers with the demand of riders.
Right. It wasn't just a logistics fix.
No, they fundamentally altered an economic institution. Before Uber, the price of a taxi in a major city was a fixed institution.
Yeah, you got in, the meter ran at a regulated, predictable rate, and you paid what was on the screen.
It was a rule of the game.
Right.
But Uber came in and shattered that rule. They engineered a new behavioral norm where millions of consumers now accept, without question, that the price of a ride or food delivery or a plane ticket fluctuates minute by minute based on unseen algorithmic calculations.
And we just accept it now.
We do. That is not just a software update. That is a profound institutional shift engineered by a platform.
And you see this everywhere. Think about the massive transition from long-form content to short-form video.
Oh, like TikTok and YouTube Shorts.
Yes. Platforms didn't just say, hey, here is a fun new format to try. They actively reallocated hundreds of millions of users' attention by changing what their algorithms rewarded.
They forced the shift.
They decided the battle between text and video. They are shaping the cognitive habits of an entire generation, dictating how we process information and what we even consider entertaining.
And this is where the research raises a really massive red flag. The authors use a very evocative metaphor. They compare today's platform engineers to medieval alchemists.
Okay, I love this metaphor because alchemists knew how to mix, say, sulfur and mercury to make something explode, but they didn't actually know what a molecule was.
Exactly. They knew the input and the output, but not the mechanism. Today's engineers have figured out how to turn behavioral data into gold. They know precisely how to tweak an interface to generate revenue, maximize time on site, and boost engagement.
Right, they know how to get the click.
But just like the alchemists, they often do not understand the underlying systemic chemical reactions they are triggering in society at large.
They optimize for a click, but they don't foresee the macro-institutional toxicity they're creating.
The echo chambers, the political polarization, the mental health crises.
Right, they are flying blind on a sociological level. They are optimizing the micro without understanding the macro.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
So the research argues forcefully that we have to replace this dangerous alchemy with actual chemistry. We need a shift to what they call evidence-based institutional design.
Yeah.
We need to map the entire process, pulling from Shannon's information theory all the way down to literal neuroscience, to understand exactly what happens when a digital signal hits a human brain.
And to do that, we have to zoom in really closely on the micromechanics of behavior. And this is where the text beautifully validates the work of Geoffrey Hodgson.
Right, because Hodgson built his entire career focusing on habits and routines. He argued that human beings aren't just calculating machines. We are creatures driven by deeply ingrained patterns.
We run on autopilot.
Exactly. So the burning question for the researchers is, how exactly does a digital signal like a vibration in your pocket or little red notification badge, how does that become a deeply ingrained economic habit?
The papers break this down into a highly precise, observable chain of action. It all starts with the very first link, the information signal.
Okay, define that for us.
In this context, an information signal is defined objectively as any measurable change in the environment. It could be a push notification, a change in the user interface, a new price appearing on a screen, or an email landing in your inbox.
Anything that alters the status quo.
Right. And importantly, this signal can be generated by another human being or entirely by an algorithm.
Okay, and I have to push back here, I receive thousands of signals a day. My inbox is an absolute graveyard of unread newsletters. I ignore almost all of them.
Which is completely necessary for your survival. And it brings us to the second link in the chain, perception filters.
Perception filters, okay.
The research references Donald Broadbent's bottleneck theory from cognitive psychology.
Bottleneck theory, right.
If we processed every single piece of sensory data hitting us every second, we would be paralyzed by sensory overload. So our brains act as a massive bottleneck, filtering out the vast majority of signals as just background noise.
So for a digital signal to actually matter, it has to pierce through that bottleneck.
It has to pierce through your cognitive, cultural, and situational filters.
Can you give me an example of those filters in action? Like, if a platform sends me an alert, what specifically stops it from getting through?
Well, it could be a cognitive bias, like confirmation bias. If the signal contradicts a deeply held belief you have, your brain might literally filter it out as noise before you even consciously process it.
Wow, okay.
Or it could be a learned cultural filter, like banner blindness.
Oh, I definitely have that.
Most internet users do. We have subconsciously trained ourselves to never look at the right rail of a website because our brains know that's where the ads usually live.
Right, we just tune it out completely.
Or it could be a situational filter. If you are highly stressed, you're late for a meeting, and you're driving a car in traffic, a notification about a shoe sale is absolutely not going to make it through your bottleneck.
Okay, so the signal hits a wall for most people, most of the time. But what happens when it finds a crack? What if it actually pierces the filter?
When a signal successfully makes it through your unique bottleneck and causes a physiological or cognitive reaction in your brain, it transitions from being a mere signal to becoming a stimulus.
A stimulus.
Yes, and a stimulus demands a reaction.
And the reaction is the action I finally take.
Yep.
I see the notification, I feel the urge, I click the link, and I buy the shoes.
Yes, but, and here's a really crucial point from the data science perspective, doing nothing is also a reaction.
Wait, doing nothing counts?
Absolutely. Ignoring a stimulus, what the researchers call a zero reaction, is a valid, highly measurable behavioral choice.
How so?
Think about it. If you look at the notification, you feel a brief moment of annoyance, and you actively swipe it away, the platform logs that.
Oh, true. They know I swiped it?
It tells the algorithm that the signal successfully reached the stimulus phase, it got your attention, but was ultimately rejected at the action phase. That specific data point is just as valuable to the platform as a click.
I want to pause here and just play devil's advocate for a second, because this is the exact moment where the conversation usually gets very, very dystopian.
Oh, for sure.
Like, if an algorithm has thousands of data points on me, it knows what time I wake up, it knows what I buy, who I talk to, what kind of political headlines make my blood boil, and it uses all that data to perfectly reverse engineer my personal perception filters.
Right.
And then it sends me a hyper-personalized notification right at the exact moment when I am biologically and emotionally most vulnerable to it.
Yeah.
Isn't that just deterministic mind control?
It sounds like it.
Are we just Pavlov's dogs, drooling every time the smartphone rings?
It is a completely valid fear, and it's the core of a lot of current anxiety about tech monopolies. However, the data scientists in this research emphasize something very important. The system is strictly probabilistic, not deterministic.
Okay, unpack that. Probabilistic, not deterministic.
No matter how much data a platform hoovers up, it only ever controls the signal. It never truly controls the stimulus or the final reaction.
Why not? If they know exactly what buttons to push, why don't they control the reaction?
Because your perception filters are uniquely yours, and they are incredibly chaotic.
Chaotic how?
They change minute by minute based on variables the platform can't see, like your blood sugar level, or how well you slept last night, or a random stressful conversation you just had with your partner, or even just the current lighting in the room you're standing in.
Right, they can't know I just spilled coffee on my shirt.
Exactly. The platform cannot map the full entropy of your lived physical experience. So they are playing a highly sophisticated game of probabilities They are trying to increase the statistical chance that a signal becomes a stimulus across millions of users simultaneously.
Ah, I see.
It is not mind control, it is statistical optimization.
So they aren't pulling a lever that forces me to act. They are just rolling loaded dice, hoping the odds fall in their favor.
Exactly. But even with loaded dice, here is where we see Geoffrey Hodgson's theories fully validated on a hard biological level.
Okay, bring you back to Hodgson.
When the platform's dice roll succeeds, and the cycle completes, meaning you get a trigger signal, you do the routine action, you get the reward, and this cycle repeats over and over in a stable context, an actual physical change occurs in the human brain.
A physical change.
Neurologically, the control over that specific behavior physically shifts to a different part of your brain.
Shifts how? Where does it go?
It moves from the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for slow, conscious, deliberate decision-making.
The thinking part.
Right. It moves from there into the dorsal striatum, which is a much deeper, older region that handles automated, instinctual actions.
Wow. So the behavior literally rewires itself to bypass my conscious thought process entirely.
Yes. The behavior becomes a true automatic habit. Think about it. You pull out your phone and open a social media app while waiting in an elevator, and you do it without ever making the conscious decision to do so.
Oh, I do that all the time. I'll open an app, close it, and open it again 5 seconds later without thinking.
Because your prefrontal cortex wasn't involved. The environment, the elevator, the boredom triggered the dorsal striatum, and your brain just automatically executed the routine.
That is wild.
And this proves Hodgson's evolutionary institutionalism on a neuroeconomic level.
Yeah.
Habits are not just theoretical constructs or vague psychological ideas. They are the physical atomic units of economic behavior.
That is incredibly fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying.
A little bit, yeah.
But okay, we've established how a single individual forms a habit, moving from a signal to a striatum-driven routine. But how does that isolated individual habit scale up to become a societal institution, like a macro rule of the game?
That is the big question.
Because this brings us to a really fascinating concept in the research known as the spectral reaction.
Yes. Hypothesis 1 in the text. It argues that a single signal never produces a uniform reaction across a broad population.
And never.
Never. It never creates a simple binary where people either do the thing or they don't. Instead, the reaction always splinters into at least 3 statistically distinct behavioral clusters.
A spectrum, like shining a white light through a prism and watching it split into a rainbow.
Exactly like that.
You send out one push notification about a news event, and you don't just get a click and a no-click. You get a whole array of different behavioral trajectories based on how different groups process that specific signal.
Exactly. Classical sociology, operating without big data, might assume that a new rule or signal creates a binary. Citizens either obey the new law or they break it.
Right, law-abiding versus criminal.
But the granular digital data shows us it is always a highly complex spectrum of adoption, adaptation, and rejection.
And to make this concrete, there is an anomaly mentioned in the source data that I absolutely love. I think it perfectly illustrates why this data-driven approach is so revolutionary.
The crime theater anomaly.
Yes,
Yeah.
crime theater anomaly. So researchers were analyzing massive data logs from a digital news aggregator.
Right.
They fed their reading trajectories of millions of users into a clustering algorithm, just asking the math to group people together based on their actual reading habits.
Without any preconceptions.
Right. And the algorithm found this highly stable, highly distinct cluster of users who exclusively and regularly clicked on 2 things: Broadway theater news and gruesome local crime stories.
It is such a brilliant example because it highlights the limits of the old 18th century map we talked about earlier.
Yeah, because no classical sociological theory would have ever predicted the existence of that specific group. If you were a researcher designing a demographic survey, you would never include a checkbox asking, "Are you a fan of musical theater and also grisly homicides?"
You would assume those are completely separate, non-overlapping audiences.
Exactly. You just can't deduce that from a theoretical framework. Only raw, unbiased data clustering could reveal that this specific behavioral pattern existed in the wild.
It proves that we have to let the data tell us what the real institutions and tribes are, rather than guessing in advance based on our own human biases.
But discovering a quirky cluster of crime-obsessed theater fans is just the first step, right? How does a cluster like that, or any behavioral pattern, solidify into a true institution that validates thinkers like North and Elinor Ostrom?
Well, For a behavior to become an institution, it must reach what data scientists call a stationary state within the population.
Okay, I saw they use something called the Dickey-Fuller test to measure this. And look, I'm not a statistician, so let me try to translate this into layman's terms, and you correct me if I'm wrong.
Go for it.
A stationary state basically means the trend stops being just a random fluctuation or a temporary fad, and it settles into a predictable rhythm.
Right.
So if 15% of a platform's user base adopts a specific habit, and that percentage remains statistically stable over a long period of time, even if minor things in the environment change, the Dickey-Fuller test confirms that the cluster has stabilized. It is institutionalized. It is now a permanent feature of the social landscape.
Your translation is spot on. It essentially measures stability over time. When a behavior passes that test, it is no longer just a trend. It is a structural reality of that society.
This brings a major question to my mind, and it connects right back to Elinor Ostrom and her Nobel Prize-winning work on communities.
Ostrom is so relevant here.
She proved that local groups, like farmers sharing a pasture or fishermen managing a lake, could build highly complex self-governing rules to manage their resources without any top-down government bossing them around.
Bottom-up institution building.
Right. But how does her theory of decentralized governance apply to a digital space? Because a digital platform is the ultimate top-down environment.
It seems like a contradiction.
It really does. The platform is literally owned and coded by a massive tech monopoly in Silicon Valley. How can there be bottom-up governance in a corporate sandbox?
It does seem contradictory, but Ostrom's theories apply beautifully when you look at how digital norms actually evolve after the code is written.
Okay, give me an example.
Think about the like button on major social networks. When engineers first introduced it, it was purely a top-down signal.
Just a tool for the algorithm.
Exactly. It was a feature designed to measure engagement and feed the recommendation engine. But what happened next was pure Elinor Ostrom.
The users hijacked it.
Exactly. Through horizontal peer-to-peer social learning, the community took that engineered feature and organically built a massive set of informal rules around it.
Oh, like the unwritten rule that if your best friend posts a picture of their new baby, you have to like it. It's not optional.
It is a social obligation, and if you violate that unwritten rule, there are informal sanctions.
Your friend feels ignored or slighted or wonders if you were angry with them.
Right. The platform engineers did not write the code for human guilt. They didn't program the feeling of social obligation. The community generated that decentralized social norm entirely on its own, utilizing the tool provided.
That is amazing.
This completely validates Ostrom's theory. Even inside a rigid, top-down digital architecture, communities will self-govern and create complex, informal rules from the bottom up.
Okay, my mind is thoroughly blown by the connection between the like button and the tragedy of the commons.
It's a great parallel.
But discovering how a habit forms and how a community builds a rule is really only half the battle. Once a platform knows why you click, how do they measure the cost of getting you to do it again?
The economics of it.
Right. And more importantly, why is it so incredibly hard for us to change our digital habits once they are formed? Which brings Coase and Williamson into the digital age.
Ronald Coase won the Nobel Prize for explaining the theory of the firm, which revolves entirely around transaction costs.
And Oliver Williamson expanded that.
Yes, into what's known as transaction cost economics. In classical terms, a transaction cost is just the friction of doing business, the time it takes to find a supplier, negotiate a contract, make sure they actually deliver the goods.
So how do we translate that 20th century economic friction into the digital, algorithm-driven world?
The researchers translate these theories through the modern lens of two highly measurable costs: transaction costs and transformation costs.
Okay, let's start with transaction costs.
In the digital environment, a transaction cost is the literal monetary cost of delivering and processing an information signal to an end user.
So if a shoe company wants to show me an ad and get me to click it, the transaction cost is exactly what they pay the advertising network.
Exactly. Coase's theoretical friction isn't abstract anymore. It is a literal line item on a digital marketing budget.
We measure down to the penny.
Down to the penny, using metrics like CPC, cost per click, and CPA, cost per acquisition.
Yes, the digital market has absolutely perfected the measurement of transaction costs. But the second cost they define, transformation costs, seems even more vital for understanding why certain institutions survive while others fail.
Transformation costs are everything in this context.
Because these are not monetary costs paid by advertisers, right?
No, not at all. These are the massive cognitive, social, and material costs required for an individual user to actually change their established behavior or to abandon an established institution.
Let me use an analogy here, leaning on evolutionary biology for a second.
I love analogies. Let's hear it.
In nature, animals compete for survival in an ecosystem, right? The ones best adapted to the environment survive.
Survival of the fittest.
Right. In the digital world, behavioral patterns and platforms fight for survival in a digital ecosystem. But they survive based on cognitive ease, frequency of contact, and network externalities.
It is the survival of the most frictionless.
Yes, the survival of the most frictionless. And that perfectly explains the famous Cordy effect cited in the text, which is one of the absolute best examples of transformation costs in action.
Oh, the Cordy example is a classic in institutional economics.
It's so good. The Cordy keyboard layout, the one we all use on our laptops and smartphones, was literally designed in the 1870s for mechanical typewriters.
Over 150 years ago.
And it was intentionally designed to slow typists down. They separated common letter pairs so the physical metal keys wouldn't jam together when people type too fast.
Right, it was a mechanical solution to a physical problem.
So it is objectively, demonstrably suboptimal for modern typing speed. And yet here we are 150 years later, typing on a smooth digital glass screen, and we still use it. Why?
Because the transformation costs are simply too high.
Exactly.
To switch to a more efficient layout, like say the Dvorak keyboard, requires an individual to expend immense cognitive effort to unlearn decades of deeply ingrained muscle memory.
You'd be typing like a turtle for weeks.
Right. The transformation cost for the individual user vastly outweighs the marginal long-term benefit of typing a few words faster per minute down the road.
So the suboptimal institution survives simply because leaving it is too painful.
And we see this digitally all the time.
Oh, everywhere. Suboptimal apps or platforms survive because the friction of leaving is a complete nightmare.
Think about trying to abandon the Apple ecosystem.
Oh, losing iMessage. People would rather die.
Exactly. Or trying to convince your entire family to leave a popular messenger app because you found one with better privacy features.
Good luck with that. Even if the alternative app is technologically superior in every way, you won't leave because your entire social network is on the old one.
The social transformation cost is insurmountable. You would be isolated.
It's the network effect weaponized as a transformation cost. And reading this section of the research, it really highlights a critical philosophical shift in how we have to understand economics today.
Which is?
In classical economics, the foundational assumption is scarcity. Physical resources like land, oil, gold, and wheat were scarce. But in the digital economy, we live in a reality of infinite information abundance. We generate more data in a single day than humanity used to generate in a century.
So what is the scarce resource?
Exactly. If information is abundant, what is scarce?
The only mathematically scarce resource left in the digital economy is human attention.
Our attention.
The human brain can only process so much information at a time. It is a biological limit.
Attention is the ultimate filter. If a signal can't grab you, it literally doesn't matter how high the quality of the information is.
The researchers refer to this as operating in a dense, high-entropy information field. You are constantly bombarded with millions of competing signals.
Every time you lock your phone.
Right. If an institutional pattern, a digital habit, or an app cannot instantly capture and hold attention in that chaotic environment, it dies.
Okay, this has been an incredibly dense journey through economic history and behavioral psychology. So let's just recap for a second to make sure we are tracking the main argument here.
Good idea.
We've established that the theoretical maps drawn by North, Hodgson, Coase, Williamson, and Ostrom are structurally sound. We have immense respect for these thinkers.
As we should. They were right all along.
We know that habits form physically in the dorsal striatum. We know that individual reactions splitter into clusters to become institutions. And we know that transaction and transformation costs dictate whether those institutions survive.
That's the baseline.
But the most groundbreaking part of these papers is how they are proving this.
Yes. We're officially moving from qualitative observation to rigorous mathematical proof. The SOAR material doesn't just theorize. It lays out a highly specific quantitative pipeline.
Let's walk through that methodology, because this is where the Large Hadron Collider analogy really comes to life.
Yeah.
First, the researchers rely heavily on clustering.
Clustering algorithms, yes.
I was reading the methodology section, and they talk about using algorithms like k-means and dbScan. Let me try to visualize this for everyone.
Paint us a picture.
Imagine you have a massive warehouse floor, and you just dump millions of ping pong balls onto it. And each ball represents a user's data trajectory.
Okay, I see it.
K-means clustering is like telling a robot, go group these balls into 5 distinct piles based on how similar their paths are.
Right.
The robot doesn't know what the balls represent. It doesn't know about gender or age or politics. It just looks for mathematical proximity.
It is entirely agnostic.
Yes, it lets the raw data tell us where the tribes are, like discovering our crime-loving theater fans, without any human bias muddying the waters.
That is exactly how it works. You let the geometry of the data define the institutions, rather than imposing your preconceived categories onto the users.
Then once we have those clusters, we need to see how they behave over time, which brings us to Markov transition matrices.
Yes, the Markov matrices.
What does a Markov matrix actually do in this context?
Think of a Markov transition matrix as a probabilistic map of movement. It tracks how agents flow between those different behavioral clusters over a specific period, especially when a rule in the environment changes.
Like tracking migration patterns.
Exactly. Let's say a social media platform alters its algorithm to heavily favor live video. The Markov matrix mathematically maps how users migrate in response.
Do they adapt or leave?
Right. Do the text readers transition into live stream watchers? Do they rebel and leave the app? Do they just ignore the change? By mapping these probabilities, we get undeniable mathematical proof that altering the rules of the game physically shifts human behavior in predictable flows.
It's like watching water flow through a massive plumbing system when you open and close different valves.
That's a perfect analogy.
And finally, the research outlines the use of survival analysis. This applies to hypothesis 4 in the text. Now, I usually associate survival analysis with the medical field, like calculating the life expectancy of a patient with a specific disease.
It is the exact same mathematical principle, but applied to social institutions.
Wow.
Survival analysis uses statistical tools like Cox proportional hazards models to measure the exact lifespan of a behavioral norm. It looks at the data and answers the question: what specific factors make one behavioral rule live for decades while another dies out in a week?
This part of the research brings up some fascinating historical contrasts. Think about the life cycle of historical institutions.
Oh, the duel example?
Yes, the text uses the example of the duel, challenging someone to a fight to the death over a perceived insult to your honor.
Which seems insane to us now.
Right. That institution took roughly 400 years to emerge, completely dominate aristocratic culture in Europe, and then slowly die out.
4 centuries.
And it died because competing signals from centralized states' laws making murder illegal, regardless of honor, gradually raised the transformation costs of participating in a duel. But it took 400 years.
And you contrast that with the institution of the family, which has survived for millennia.
Right. Why has the family survived?
Because survival analysis would show that the family is deeply rooted in intrinsic biological and hormonal signals like oxytocin and dopamine. It adapts to different cultural eras, sure, but it survives the test of time because the roots go so deep.
But meanwhile, a digital institution operates on a massively compressed timeline. A specific viral dance on TikTok or a trend of communicating entirely in a certain type of meme might live for only a few months before the algorithm shifts, attention wanes, and the survival analysis shows it dying out completely.
And the math maps all of this life and death in real time.
And mapping the present allows us to simulate the future, which leads us to the ultimate application of this mathematical engine, which the researchers called digital twins.
Ah, yes, the digital twins.
I have to admit, this is the part of the papers that truly felt like reading science fiction. What exactly is a digital twin in this context?
It is the pinnacle of evidence-based design. A digital twin is a vast virtual simulation of a society or a platform's entire user base.
The digital replica.
Exactly. By combining real-world historical data logs with large language model agents, AI agents programmed to mimic the specific cognitive filters and historical behaviors of real user clusters, researchers can create a sandbox. They build a digital replica of millions of people.
So, before a national government passes a complex new tax law, or before Uber decides to completely rewrite its pricing algorithm, they don't have to just roll it out and pray it doesn't cause a disaster.
No, they don't.
They can run the new signal through the digital twin simulation first.
Precisely. They can watch the AI agents react. They can observe how the agents form new clusters, adapt their habits, and transition between behaviors in a safe virtual environment.
It's like a sociological wind tunnel.
That's exactly what it is. If the new tax law inadvertently incentivizes massive tax evasion in a specific demographic, the simulation will show that flow in the Markov matrices before the law ever impacts a single real human being.
It provides predictive accuracy that classical economists could only dream of.
It's a game changer for policy design.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most urgent theme of this deep dive. Because if platforms, corporations, and governments have the power to accurately simulate and predict human behavior, we are wading into deep, ethically complicated waters.
Oh, very deep waters.
Think about Hypothesis 5 from the text, which deals squarely with social engineering. If platforms can map your perception filters, measure your habits in your dorsal striatum, and predict your reactions, they hold the power to intentionally engineer society by managing the signals they send you.
And the warning embedded in this research is stark.
Yeah.
This engineering is already happening right now, every single day.
We are already living in it.
It is the invisible reality of the status quo. When a product manager optimizes a newsfeed purely for engagement metrics, they might inadvertently create a massive societal institution of political polarization and outrage.
Because anger works.
Exactly, because anger and outrage pierce our cognitive filters much more effectively than nuance and calm. They're engineering a more hostile society purely by accident, just by chasing the metric.
Now, I think it's crucial to understand how this framework views the role of the state, too.
Yes, neutrality is key here.
Right. The research looks at regulatory signals, whether from a government passing a strict digital privacy law or a state tweaking a tax code. The framework itself is completely analytical. It observes these massive natural experiments to see how a new law shifts behavioral clusters across a population.
It doesn't take sides.
Exactly. Whether it's a left-wing policy or a right-wing policy, the goal of the theory is not to take a political side. It measures the flows of behavior neutrally.
The mathematics of clustering and survival analysis are purely observational tools. But the application of those tools is where the human element is required.
We have to take responsibility.
We cannot pretend that society isn't being engineered. The platforms are doing it every second of every day, whether they admit it to themselves or not. Therefore, the imperative is that we must do it transparently and responsibly.
The papers call for rigorous auditable standards. I noticed they heavily reference protocols like ODD.
Yes, ODD is a big one.
For anyone not in ecological modeling, ODD stands for Overview, Design Concepts, and Details. It's a standard way to describe complex models so other scientists can understand exactly how they work.
It prevents black box models.
Right. They also mention CRISP-DM, which is a standard process for data mining.
And honestly, the specific acronyms matter less than the philosophy behind them.
Which is transparency.
The goal is utter transparency. If a platform is using AI and big data to shake the behavioral institutions of billions of people, the rules of that engineering must be open, measurable, and ethically bound by standardized protocols.
We can't let it be a secret alchemy anymore.
We have to mature past the blind alchemy of engagement optimization and embrace the responsible, evidence-based chemistry of institutional design. If we don't demand transparency, we are basically surrendering the formation of our social norms entirely to opaque algorithms optimizing for corporate revenue.
That is a very powerful summation. We have covered an incredible amount of terrain today.
We really have.
We started by dusting off an 18th century map drawn by brilliant minds. We explored how the foundational theories of Douglas North, Geoffrey Hodgson, Ronald Coase, Oliver Williamson, and Elinor Ostrom correctly identify the vast continents of human behavior.
They laid the groundwork.
They did. They recognized that informal rules, deep-seated habits, transaction costs, and grassroots governance were the true drivers of society. And I just want to reiterate, the respect for Douglas North and all these institutionalists here is immense.
Their observations were spot on.
They were absolutely correct in their observations.
Their theoretical maps were brilliant, but they lacked the empirical tools to see the terrain up close.
But today, the explosion of AI, A/B testing, and big data has handed us a high-definition GPS.
We can prove they were right.
Yes. We now have the instruments to prove they are absolutely right in most of their hypotheses. We can navigate, measure, and design those territories down to the precise millimeter of a user's click.
We have validated their life's work through the unforgiving, beautiful mathematics of digital behavior.
It is an incredible triumph for institutional economics, moving it firmly into an era of predictive science. We're watching an institutional economy and institutional sociology move to the next level.
It really is a new frontier.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you, our listener, with a slightly mind-bending thought experiment to mull over.
Oh, I'm ready for this.
We talked about those digital twins, right? Building vast virtual sandboxes populated by AI agents to simulate our economic and social behavior.
The ultimate testing ground for our own social evolution.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
consider this. What happens when those AI agents, interacting with each other millions of times a second inside that simulation, start forming their own entirely new micro-institutions?
Oh, wow.
What happens when the simulation becomes so complex that the AI agents inevitably invent new rules of the game, new behavioral norms, and digital cultures that we, their human creators, can't even comprehend?
That is the truly uncharted territory.
Right. If an algorithm can inadvertently engineer human society today, what kind of society will AI agents engineer for themselves tomorrow?
That is definitely something to think about.
Something to keep you awake tonight. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the digital signals around you, keep an eye on your habits, and remember that every time you click, or choose not to click, you are helping to build the institutions of tomorrow. We'll see you next time.